I tried to save her. They said I killed her with no evidence because they couldn't find the people.
Is Dr. Jeffrey McDonald guilty of killing his wife and children 9 years ago?
Without a shadow of a doubt.
New evidence from a woman who claims she was present at the murders seems to contradict the guilty verdict.
I'm just trying to keep an innocent man from being in prison.
Guilty or not? Watch this exclusive on Jack Anderson Confidential. During the next 30 minutes, these citizens will confront the President of the United States.
Mr. President, my question to you is, what can you do for the poor people? I've seen what you've done for the rich.
There seems to be a new movement, a new policy that the United States is formulating in the Middle East. Does this mean that you are changing your traditional commitment toward Israel?
Mr. President, why are you making all these budget cuts? Why can't you let some of us mothers that would like to work and get the Medicaid too?
You'll meet them and President Reagan in Now from Washington, Jack Anderson.
It's been a tragic week for Lebanon. Tragic, too, for the United States. Lebanon's charismatic young president-elect Bashir Gemayel is dead. He had the eloquence, the brains, and the guile to become a forceful leader. And Lebanon needed a forceful leader. Last month, I spent several hours with Gemayel in Beirut. His compound was surrounded by sandbags and bodyguards. He spoke of his 2-year-old daughter who had been killed in a bomb meant for him. On August 30th, I reported that he was marked for assassination. Now it has happened, and Lebanon is leaderless. CIA sources tell me no other leader has the strength to end the chaos in Lebanon. Oh, it's true that Gemayel was controversial, but he was also pro-American, and the rivals who killed him were anti-American. I'll tell you later what the CIA expects to happen now that Gemayel is gone. From time to time, I'll be doing special reports on events critical to the United States. This week, a report on the crisis facing us. A few days ago, the Urban Institute reported that the rich are getting richer and the poor are being left out. This economic gap could be widened still more if the White House should implement ideas that are now being discussed behind closed doors. Aides want to call a special session of Congress after the November election to reform the Social Security system. I've seen a confidential report which says Social Security should be cut $20 to $40 billion. The report suggests that action should be taken later this year or early in 1983. In a minute, a confrontation between President Reagan and the deprived. A special report.
If in all the world you could have only one source of news and information, what would you want it to be? Think about that for a second. Only one source of news and information. What would it be? If you say Time magazine, you're not alone. More than 29 million people all over the world turn to Time's lively pages each week to catch up on what's new and what's news everywhere in every field. With writing so fresh and pictures so colorful, you enjoy every minute and start looking forward to the next issue. When? Time is back again with the latest books and movies. What's happening with sports, business, and people, and what may happen next. In all, Time gives you 30 exciting departments of news and ideas. And now, Time makes one of its biggest offers ever. 26 weeks of Time for less than 79 cents an issue. Over 45% off Time's cover price. Payable in 3 easy installments of $6.77. So call, toll free, 1-800-621-3024. Oh, by the way, with your paid subscription, will also send you Times Desk Reference Library, the Webster Dictionary, Roget's Thesaurus, and the Signet Hammond World Atlas, free. Call 1-800-621-3024. Get Times Desk Reference Library, free. And time for 3 easy installments of $6.77. Our operators are standing by. Remember, Time is over 45% off, and the reference library, all 3 books, is free.
For weeks I've been investigating the plight of the poor in America. I've talked with the downtrodden and the desperate. I've listened to the complaints of the farmer and the factory worker. They feel that President Reagan doesn't care about them, that he isn't listening to them. So I invited them to speak into the camera and tell the president what's on their minds. He agreed to hear them out and to give them some straight answers. First, here's Keith Lisey from Austin, Texas.
Mr. President, I've traveled for the past 5 months from state to state, including Arizona, Colorado, Pennsylvania, and back to Texas, looking for work. I'm on my way back to California right now looking for a job. I'm hoping I'll get one when I get there. We've run into various other people, lots of other people, on the road who are in the same situation, if not worse. Mr. President, my question to you is, what can you do for the poor people? I've seen what you've done for the rich.
Well, Keith, first of all, let me say that I wish you well, and there's no question about your sincerity and your desire for work. Having grown up myself and gone into the job market at the time of the Great Depression, I know what a tragedy this is, to want work, to not be able to find it. What we have done for the poor is take an inflation rate that for 2 years back to back was double digit, and that was 12.4% inflation rate when we started, and bring that inflation rate down to 5.4% since the beginning of this year. Now, that might not sound like direct help, but it is, particularly to the people of lower incomes and to what you would call the poor. Obviously, people with a lot of money and people with high incomes don't have to spend as big a percentage of their earnings or their money for the necessities of life. But the people at the lower bracket have to spend virtually everything they make just for those necessities, for themselves and their families, for food and clothing and shelter. Now, 5.4, that isn't even good enough. We want inflation all the way down to 0. And I dream of a day when we'll see prices not only remaining the same, but maybe going down some. We've reached the turning point as far as the recession is concerned. It's going to be slow, it always is, coming out of a recession, but we're on the way out of this one.
I'd like you to listen to George Saunders from Washington, D.C. He's a fired government worker, and he's a little angry. I'd like you to hear what he has to say.
Mr. Reagan, you've totally demoralized the federal employees. I was brought up in a family dedicated to public service. I trained myself well on the graduate level to do work for the public service if that's what I choose to do. I'm very angry.
Our question and our trouble is not with the employees, it is with government policies. You know, for example, that one long-time old-fashioned policy in the federal government is to rate people in government and their salary and their level of income and stature on the basis, if they are supervisory of the people that are employed under them, on the number of the people employed, which has created a tendency at certain levels of government to empire build, to see if they cannot employ more people in order to further their own personal standing. And I think it's a system that should be changed. I have to tell you that having made some sizable reforms when I was a governor in California, and now trying to here at the federal level, but you've heard wrong if you think that I am in any way denigrating public employees. I'm not.
About 2 million federal employees are about 18% behind the private sector in wages and benefits. Doesn't this cause you problems in getting people, top-level people, to come into government?
I have been told that the federal government is ahead of the private sector. Now, this may not go all the way on up. I think at executive levels, no, there is no comparison. We ask cabinet officers, for example, to handle multi-billion-dollar operations at an income that is 1/10 of what an executive in a comparable position out in the private sector is getting.
There's a question on peace. This is an important one. I'd like you to listen to it.
Mr. President, my name is Sam Steinberg, and I own a small grocery store in Northwest Washington. I've been reading some new developments in the Middle East, especially regarding the change, what seems to be a change in the American policy toward the Middle East and Israel in particular. Does this mean that America is changing its traditional policy of support toward Israel?
This country has had a moral obligation and felt a moral responsibility to the State of Israel for 34 years, since it was created in 1948. I have felt a personal sense of obligation myself since, or for those 34 years. No, we have not changed our position. We are dedicated to the preservation of Israel, that it must continue to exist as a nation. Now, I stated on the air just recently that Israel cannot go on forever existing as an armed camp. Economically, it is impossible for them to continue. The answer to their problem must be peace in the Middle East. And so what we're trying to do is speak to and work with, as well as Israel, the moderate Arab nations particularly. And I am very optimistic that we can have success in that. One of the things that must be resolved in that is a settlement once and for all of the problem of the Palestinian refugees.
Are you ever going to be able to persuade Menachem Begin of this? If he were sitting here where I am, what would you say to him?
I'd say pretty much the same thing. I have to think this, Jack, about some of the things that are being said on both sides since my speech the other night. Both sides have found things in it they can approve, and both sides have found things they can disapprove. But all through the speech, I kept saying these things must be settled by negotiation.
In a moment, we'll return to more questions addressed to President Reagan.
If you have to wait a week for business news, maybe it's not news anymore. The Wall Street Journal gives you today's business news today, so you can use it today.
Get all the business news you need when you need it. Get the Wall Street Journal. Delivered every business day for 6 months for $47. Just 37 cents a day. Phone toll free 800-453-4806. That's 6 months, $47, only 37 cents a day. Phone 800-453-4806 now.
My name is Cheryl Flowers. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I work part-time. I'm on AFDC, and I need Medicaid because I have an 11-month-old. He's a very sickly baby, and I need the Medicaid to take him back and forth to the doctor. But you can't get Medicaid and work too. But I really need Medicaid. Mr. President, why are you making all these budget cuts? Why can't you let some of us mothers that would like to work and get the Medicaid too?
Well, Mrs. Flowers, we haven't been making budget cuts to speak of. We've been cutting the rate of increase in the budget, but we're spending more on the programs such as you're talking about there than we were spending last year, and last year more than the year before. I know there's a misunderstanding about this, but as to your particular problem, Mrs. Flowers, the states, not the federal government, sets the standards for Medicaid. And in your state, Missouri, that's one of the states in which if you are eligible for aid for dependent children, you are eligible for Medicaid. And Jack, if there's some reason why she is not getting that, in addition, while she's eligible for aid for dependent children, I'd like to know about it and look into it, because that is the standard of that state. And maybe somebody's making a mistake if she isn't getting it.
We'll find out.
All right.
But I think she's speaking for a lot of women and a lot of men who want to work but can't get jobs that pay enough. They have to depend upon some welfare. If they take the jobs, they're no longer eligible for the welfare.
What with taxes to pay, the level of income that you have to receive to equal what you're getting on welfare is many times more than a person can get in just starting into a new position. And so it's government itself which in a way is making it impossible for them. On the other hand, in that program that Mrs. Flowers is on, Aid for Dependent Children, there are inducements in there. That, in other words, you can take a job and as you are permitted certain deductions from your income from that job to offer an incentive for you to take the job, and that determines the level of welfare that you continue to get. So there is an effort being made to let people work at the same time they get the other. But if she isn't getting Medicaid, there's something wrong. I want to know about that.
Good, good. We have just one more question.
All right.
Mr. President, I'm Clint Butler from Austin, Texas. I'm the director of Caritas of Austin, which is a church charity-sponsored agency. During the past few months, we've noticed a dramatic increase in the number of people seeking our help. My question is, what programs can be reinstituted to help agencies such as ours? Because we cannot do all the things to pick up the slack for the federal cutbacks.
I'm not surprised that you're getting more people coming in now. We have reached a crucial point in unemployment, the 9.8% rate. There are probably people who are coming to the end of their unemployment benefits, but it is not the result, again, of budget cuts, because on the various social programs in toto, we're spending more than we were, as I said earlier in the program, than the previous year. It is true some programs have been cut back, not in the sense of cutting back on the people who have real need, but because we found that they were dollar inefficient. They were programs in which the bureaucracy running them was getting most of the budget, and very little of it was getting to the people the program was intended to help. And I know that as people pass the word and as times are hard, there are those who find that they can improve their situation, even if they're still getting federal grants, by taking advantage of private charities also to add to what they're getting from the government. And I don't know the answer to that, except hang in there, because I just know that between us all and between people like yourself who are doing this at the private level, what we're trying to accomplish at the government level, we're going to come out of these troubled times, and we're going to be the America that we have known in the past and that we want to be in the future.
Mr. Mr. President, thank you for your time.
Well, Jack, thank you for giving me a chance to be here.
When we return, an insight into President Reagan and my predictions for the future. The most publicized man in America, Ronald Reagan, is still a mystery to millions of people. There's an all-American quality about him that compels trust and confidence. Perhaps it's his open face, his quick grin. He also has an easiness of manner and engaging sincerity. But is this all an act? After all, he is an actor who made movies before he turned to politics. As a politician, he's been tough, even harsh. Does he hide a mean spirit behind his amiable manner? What's President Reagan really like? Well, to find out, I borrowed one of the CIA's methods. The CIA carefully studies and psychoanalyzes world leaders in order to understand them better. So I asked a team of psychologists and psychoanalysts, headed by the world-famous Dr. Michael Maccabee, to analyze the president for me. They believe Reagan, of course, was influenced by his childhood. His father was an unsuccessful shoe salesman with a drinking problem. But the son was encouraged to make good by a strong-willed mother. He got ahead by developing a pleasing personality, by selling his Midwestern charm. As a movie star, he found himself adrift in the world of make-believe. He tended to adopt the attitudes of those around him, to look to heroes for guidance. One of his first heroes was Franklin D. Roosevelt. So Reagan became a New Deal liberal, and he was elected by liberals to be president of the Screen Actors Guild. In this capacity, he came into conflict with hardcore communists posing as liberals. The experience soured Reagan on liberalism. He began to question his beliefs. Then he married Nancy Davis, a firm conservative, and came into contact with conservatives. Again, Reagan adopted the attitudes of his associates. But this time, his circle of friends were self-made millionaires. He accepted their vision of America. Let me quote directly from the psychoanalysis. Reagan's political beliefs remain simple and inflexible. He believes that government should do the minimum. His sympathies do not extend to the victims of social and technological change, people he doesn't know and hasn't seen. He sentimentalizes successful people who follow the model of Horatio Alger. But the psychoanalysts find nothing mean or vindictive about the president. They describe him as a tolerant, amiable man. Those close to him probably find him a soft touch. Yet, he's a leader who sets his own goals and makes his own decisions. Still, he can delegate authority, and he listens to the advice of those he trusts. The psychoanalysts say he makes political concessions, but doesn't rethink his basic views. He longs for a simpler society and has trouble coping with rapid change. So, here is Dr. Maccabee's conclusion. I'm quoting, "Ronald Reagan has the leadership style and engaging personality that could make him an ideal modern leader. But his backward vision does not focus on the realities of our time." Now as to the Middle East. President Reagan believes he can bring peace to this embattled area. Here's what he told me the day before Bashir Gemayel was assassinated in Lebanon.
Just as Egypt signed a peace treaty, there are other Arab nations, and I believe they're ready to come together and negotiate agreements so that we can find the Arab nations and Israel in the Middle East, sure of their borders, sure of their neighbors, convinced that they can live in peace with each other.
CIA analysts take a much more grim view of the peace prospects. They tell me that the Palestine Liberation Organization did not live up to its agreement to evacuate Lebanon and give up its arms. Thousands of PLO troops stayed in Lebanon in hiding. They stashed their weapons in underground bunkers. Those who pulled out turned over their weapons to the Lebanese radicals who had been fighting with them. Now some of the evacuated PLO guerrillas are sneaking back into Lebanon. The assassination of Lebanon's President-elect Bashir Gemayel also eliminates the only real leader whom the Israelis trusted. So the Israeli operation has failed. The PLO are still in Lebanon. No government would now be strong enough to unite the warring factions, bring stability to Lebanon, and sign a peace treaty with Israel. The CIA, therefore, expects the Israelis to renew the mop-up operation they started. The CIA also fears the fighting will ignite a war between Israel and Syria.
Well, there are people who are in real need out there. I hear from them every day. I talk to a lot of them. Is there anything specific that you can promise them? Any real hope that you can hold out?
I am optimistic because there isn't any problem this country of ours can't lick. If you look back to the Great Depression, if you look to the wars that have beset us and so forth, we are finding answers to this.
I share President Reagan's faith in America. Our free enterprise system has produced the world's #1 industrial power, #1 agricultural power, #1 technological power, #1 economic power. And I believe we still have the imagination and boldness, the surging hope born of idealism, the toughness and courage to solve our problems. This is Jack Anderson. I'll be back next week with 2 startling investigative reports.
I know that in the Department of Agriculture, they've made trips in these 20 months we've been here to 23 different countries. We're not only trying to develop those markets and help in that regard, we also are meeting with our friends and allies in Europe and in Japan, where there have been practices that have made for unfair competition in the export market.
You know, about 200,000 farm loans are delinquent, I understand. And with farm surpluses and sagging prices, it's an emergency situation. Do you have an emergency program to help these people?
Well, the Department of Agriculture, something like $11 billion. That's 2.5 times more than it was last year. So we think that for the real emergency cases, we can.
Mr. President, thank you.
From the West Coast to the East Coast, across the Atlantic to London and Frankfurt to Hawaii, fly World Airways to the world of your dreams. World, the airline for people who hate to waste money. Jack Anderson Confidential is a Jack Berry and Dan Enright production in association with Able Communications.